So, if you've been following the news lately, you may have heard that PRS and Gibson are having a fight over a certain old gentleman called Ted McCarty and his legacy and his name. So, the question really is, which one is the real Ted McCarty? Is it this 1959 Gibson Les Paul standard 1959 reissue? Or is it this PRS? What's it called? The PRS Ted McCarty. Keep watching. Okay, folks, so this is a very exciting one. There are 2 or 3 reasons why this is exciting. I know a reasonable amount about PRS guitars, so it is very unusual for me to discover a model that I've not heard of. It is unusual for me to find it over here at home in Singapore. Found it in a local shop in Singapore. And it is even more unusual that that guitar turns out to be, well, it's just a masterpiece. And the final cherry on the cake is that just as I found this guitar, suddenly the name of this guitar, the name of its namesake, has just blown up in the guitaring press because of the PRS Gibson lawsuit. I'm not going to cover the lawsuit in this. What this video is going to be about this particular very, very amazing guitar and everything you need to know about its history of the model, the specs, quality, tones, visuals, impressions, everything you need to know. Let's get into it. So, the history of McCarty begins, of course, with Gibson in the 1950s. Most of you who watch this channel would know that, but if you don't, here's the 4 or 5 sentence summary. Theodore McCarty was the president of Gibson in the 1950s till the early 60s, I believe. And he was responsible for all the golden age Gibsons, from the Les Paul, the ES335, the SG, the Flying V, the Explorer, you name it. Later on in life, in the late 80s and early 90s, when Ted McCarty was very old, he became a mentor to Paul Reed Smith, and he gave him a few of the tricks of the trade in terms of what Gibson was actually doing in the 1950s. Paul Reed Smith incorporated it into their guitars, and very specifically they made a guitar called the McCarty, which was a much more vintage inspired guitar, a much more shaped like a PRS but thicker bodied, having a stop tail, similar to the stop tail actually. And that was kind of their nod to the 50s era of Gibson. Today the McCarty name is known for an outstanding guitar called the McCarty 594, which has literally taken over the world, and along with the Silver Sky has helped PRS reach out to a lot more new players, and as part of the SE lineup has expanded as well. It's kind of really funny. I was just, meeting, I'm a very relatively serious guitarist. I take it very seriously. Some people are casual guitarists, but I was pleasantly surprised to find the SE McCarty 594 standard, very affordable and a very good guitar, which I will review at some point in time. I was very surprised to find it in many people's houses. So the McCarty name is certainly going far thanks to PRS actually, not so much thanks to Gibson. Now, let's get into what this is. This is a McCarty, but this is a very, very special McCarty, and this is maybe the rarest kind of McCarty you will find, and I'm going to argue perhaps the best, and I'll tell you why. So the McCarty, when it was launched in 1995, came with what's called a PRS scale length. Scale length, for those of you who don't know, distance between the nut and where the string hits the bridge. You actually measure the distance from the 0 to 12 fret and double it. That's how you calculate scale length. Point is, PRSs have 25 inch scale lengths. Gibson, you say that they have 24.75 inch, very small differences. But reality is that they had even shorter scale lengths in the era of Ted McCarty. So perhaps in homage to that, they released the Ted McCarty, which was like a McCarty model, but with a shorter scale length, 24.5. So even though this looks like a typical PRS double cut, this has a 24.5 inch scale length. There were a few limited runs of this model. Probably the most notable ones were the runs from a dealer called Wilcut in the US. What makes this particular guitar and this particular run very special is, firstly, it's of course a DC245. Sorry, I should have said that first. This model was called the Ted McCarty, I'll have to backtrack a little bit. But basically, the DC245 stands for double cut, 24.5 inch scale. Ted McCarty's, the model's name Ted McCarty, had this headstock, which is not a typical PRS headstock. It's a Santana headstock, makes it very distinctive. I don't think it does anything to the tone, but it's just a nice touch. So that's why when I said DC245, that's what I meant. So Wilcut did a run of these DC245s. And they also did SC245, which is with the Ted McCarty headstock, which is single cut 245, which was a proper model in the PRS catalog. What makes this particular run and this particular guitar special is it has a nitro finish. At that time, PRS were doing poly. This is not the new PRS nitro, for sure, because PRS is now doing a nitro finish. This is more similar. And to me, and this is my impression, I could be wrong, there are people actually working in the PRS factory who would know much more than me. But just my impression, this feels a lot like the private stock nitro. The nitro that you get on private stock guitars, which you do not get on regular PRS guitars. So it feels a lot like that, much more traditional. You know, the neck of this almost feels like, if you play a older Gibson, like a Gibson from the 80s or the 70s, because that's about as old as I can afford, the 50s and 60s are too expensive for me. They have a kind of a worn-in feeling. The nitro has a certain worn-in feeling. This kind of feels like that. This is not glossy at all. I'm 99.9% sure this is that kind of nitro. That's special. The top itself is extremely special. So the reason I spotted this guitar is I spotted it hanging in the window of the guitar shop's wall, and I was like, wow, they got a private stock. Turns out it's not a private stock. It just took me a second when I looked up and I saw the headstock, and I was like, wow, it's not a private stock, but it's even more special. It's a Ted McCarty. I had vaguely heard of them, but playing this in person kind of blew me away. And you know what? These aren't that much money. This probably cost me in the range of what a new PRS costs, maybe a little bit less even. And a new PRS, chord guitar, a non-10 top, does not have anything like the kind of top. It does not have anything kind of the finish. And it certainly does not have this headstock and this kind of rarity. So, all in all, very, very rare and special guitar, and very, very good, which we'll get into when we talk about sounds. Okay, so let's talk about the specs, though I've already rambled about a few of them. 24.5 inch scale is what makes it notable, but otherwise standard PRS fare. This is a flame maple top, super high tier 10 top. Does this have a 10? It doesn't even have a 10. You know what that means? It doesn't mean that it's not a 10 top. It just means that it's even higher than 10. Because typically I don't always see artist tops. I'll have to look at one of my artist packs to check if it has a 10 written on it or not. I don't think it does. So there's that. The top is incredible. Very lightweight body. So let's be clear. Most McCartys do not weigh as light as this. I am shocked. This is one of the lightest, thicker bodied PRSs that I have. I measured it. It was 7.4 pounds. And that is custom 24 territory, or sometimes even lighter. So this is extremely comfortable. I had a few friends come over and play it the other day, and they were just stunned at how light and how well balanced the guitar was. So all PRS guitars, all PRS made in USA core guitars are very high quality. But there are some that just stand out to just be in a different league. That's kind of what makes the difference between a core PRS guitar and a private stock. Private stock has got everything maxed out. These are all the subtle details, the weight, the balance, how it looks. It just kind of adds up. And this guitar, for me, just really gives a private stock kind of a feeling, just the way the finish feels, how it looks. So there's that. Rosewood fretboard, a very nice rosewood fretboard, not a very dark one, but wonderful grain, very creamy. What makes the Ted McCarty model also special is this veneer. So it doesn't have a regular PRS satin veneer, rather. It has a gloss black veneer with a little bit of flame on it, actually. And it has Paul Reed Smith's signature and Ted McCarty written on it. This is the Santana headstock. It harks back to the older guitars that PRS used to make for Santana. Till today, the Santana guitar continues to have this headstock, different from the other PRS guitars. Initially, I was not the biggest fan of this headstock, but I've grown to like it, and now I actually prefer it because it's different, because the regular PRS headstock is everywhere. It's on SCs, it's on everything. This thing is rare as hell. Neck. One of my favorite parts about the guitar, and the second favorite part will be the sound, which I'll get into. Proper thick Les Paul like feeling neck. I believe it's a wide fat. Wide fat is also my favorite PRS neck, but there is something about it that makes it wider, and maybe not wider, but makes it fatter. I don't know. There are subtle differences, perhaps. Maybe the day they carved it in 2010 was a fun day. I don't know. PRSs aren't inconsistent, but the guitars are guitars. Wood is wood. It's organic. It is not completely machine made. It is not completely cookie cutter. There are subtle differences, and this one subtle difference tells me this is a big, fat, chunky, very vintage, very nice feeling neck. Overall, the impression that this gives me, and there's only another guitar in my collection that gives me that impression, which is the Signature Limited. That's a private stock, actually. I'm going to be covering that in a video very soon. These two guitars, this Ted McCarty, in fact, I'm going to bring the Signature Limited. Give me a second. So here we are. This is an actual private stock Signature Limited. So these two guitars give me the feel, both in terms of the way they feel, just the overall vibe, the resonance. They give me really, really vintage, old, worn in, well used in a very, very good kind of a way, kind of a feel. It's really the kind of feel that I've had from playing the very few vintage guitars that I've played. There are a few vintage guitars that I have played. The 74 Les Paul Custom in my collection, 50s Junior, and another late 50s or early 60s Junior as well. And when Nitro has been played and settled in for that period of time, it has a certain feel to it. It's not gloss, it's not satin, it's not the cheap satin that you get everywhere. It just has a feel, it just has a vibe. And these two guitars, though they're not that old, this one is 12 years old, 2011, 13 now. This one is 14 years old. They just have that vibe of a 30, 40, 50-year-old guitar. Yet, of course, they are incredible shape, perfectly functional, and not scratched up or banged up or relicked in any way. So that vintage Gibson vibe, I am really getting it from this guitar. And I'm guessing it's a little bit by design, because ultimately this is called a Ted McCarty. So, all of these details together are making it very, very Ted McCarty-esque, or very, very Gibson Les Paul-esque, the shape aside. So yes, that's just something I had to call out about this guitar. I want to talk about the electronics a little bit. This has 5909s. For those of you unfamiliar with the PRS terminology, 59 refers to the year that the pickup is inspired by, 1959. 09 is the year that it came out. So these pickups came out in 2009. And the thing with these PRS pickups is that they use wire from the same machine that was used to make the wire for the pickups for Gibson guitars in the 1950s. Make of that what you may, but these pickups are incredible. They are incredibly Now, I don't know whether it's the pickup or the guitar, but they are incredibly sweet sounding, so creamy, yet so clear. It's literally, these are some of my favorite pickups right now. I love the 5815 low turns that I get in my McCarty 594. But I'm liking this a lot, so that I'm actually thinking about getting some 5909s and trying them out. I don't know whether it's the scale length, honestly, or it's the guitar, but I'm just thinking of trying it out, even in my McCarty 594s. This is probably... then what else? Electronics wise, this is a McCarty layout, master volume, master tone, 3-way switch, and coil split. The coil split is a little bit different from the more modern PRS coil splits where you don't have too much of a volume drop off. In this one, you do have a volume drop off. So that's one thing to note. What else? Mahogany body I mentioned. Set neck. Vintage tuners. I don't mind. I prefer locking tuners, but it's okay. I can live with it. I can do the correct method for looping the strings. And then, of course, you have this aluminium bridge. Another beauty. 22 frets, binding on the fretboard, natural binding on the side of the guitar. Yeah, everything that you can dream of. This one is a pristine example. Pristine. Not a fault with it. I could perhaps say light signs of use, but you'll need to be more observant than me to really notice them. There's a little bit of a scratching over here. It's a nitro guitar at the end of the day. But absolutely as good, or if not better, than what you'd expect for something 12 years old. Let's get into the sounds. We'll start off with some clean sounds. Just the neck pickup. As you can see, very rounded, sweet, yet clear. Just directly comparing with the Gibson. This is a touch more muffled, a touch less clear. Coil splits on the neck now. A little bit of a volume drop, but quite crispy actually. Middle position on the PRS. We'll compare this with the Gibson in a second. Not too much of a difference here actually. I couldn't tell too much if you asked me to. Very nice acousticy sound for the middle coil split for the PRS. Very usable tone, especially with effects. Bridge on the PRS. Again, never too spiky. Maintains definition yet not too harsh on the ear. I actually don't like the bridge sound of the Gibson. It's a bit too tinny for me actually. A bit harsher than the PRS. Bridge split, quite a bright sound. You could definitely do a bit of a telly thing here. Now let's hear the neck pickup with distortion with the Gibson. What you expect to hear, right? That sweet tone. Now we'll see how the PRS does. This for me is much sweeter than the Gibson, especially in the room. And this is this guitar's calling card, honestly. Off bend, but you still hear the sound. And it sustains and has so many harmonics. It's just very nice. Now we'll hear the bridge sound of the Gibson Les Paul. And the R9 has a great sound, I have to say. Just classic right there. The PRS is okay, but I think it's a touch less authentic, but very close. Not as much of a difference as we saw in the neck, but the PRS was much better to my ears. So as you heard and as I explained, this guitar sounds more like an R9, like a 1959 Les Paul reissue, than an actual 1959 Les Paul reissue. When I think of the Les Paul sound, it's really the sound of this guitar that gives me that. And that is what for me makes it very different from a McCarty 594. The thing is, the McCarty 594 is, what should I say? It's a much brighter guitar than you would imagine, because the sought after 59 Les Paul tone is of course always called Telly on steroids, and that is a surprisingly bright sound. And for a lot of people who are used to playing Les Pauls and who do not play 1959 Les Pauls, they agree with that in concept, but when they think of a Les Paul sound, they always think of something a little bit less bright than the then I'm guessing what actual 1959s are like, and then I'm guessing what the 59 for the 594 is like, because I pretty much trust Paul Reed Smith if he has really A-B'd a 59 and tried to make the 594 sound like it, and there are some good videos with Tim Pierce, etc. doing it. I'm pretty certain that a 594 sounds like a 59 Les Paul, a real one. This one is not as bright, and to my ears that makes it a little bit nicer for me. These differences are subtle, but they can be felt. Of course, you can work with EQs and you can make something a little less bright, something a little bit more, whatever. But if you think about out of the box, connect to an amp, get the sound you want, this one does a better job for me than the McCarty 594, frankly. It's not a single cut, which is kind of one of the things that I not hold against it because it's so good. But yeah, so it's kind of strange to get that single cut sound without having a single cut shape. And the other advantage is, if you listen to the cleans, like I was saying, the cleans don't get washed out. They don't get lost in a mix like the R9s would. I've played Gibson Les Pauls in bands for a long period of time, and it always gets lost compared to like the Telly or Strat, especially for clean sounds. I'm not talking about distortion here. So this guitar has a much more present sound in clean while still retaining the sweetness in distortion, so makes it a very, very potent guitar. What do I not like about the guitar? Frankly, nothing much. There are two things. I am not a vintage color guy, so this color, which is extremely beautiful for most, is not my color, frankly. I mean, I was attracted, seduced by the top, but the color is not my cup of tea. I'm not into vintage amber or natural. I think this is called vintage yellow or vintage amber. I can't be sure, but this is a very classic PRS color. So that's the main disadvantage. For me, I've got nothing else bad to say about it, frankly. Even the color is just a personal preference, and of course my personal preference is single cut guitars with tremolos. This is neither a single cut nor does it have a tremolo, so that's my personal taste. You cannot fault the guitar for that. It's just a perfect guitar. Yeah, so net, who is this guitar for? It's for the person who wants the Les Paul sound, who likes the feel of a fixed bridge, doesn't bother with a tremolo and all that, just likes the classical Les Paul kind of a atmosphere, but cannot tolerate the weight of the Les Paul and would love a little bit more of an ergonomic solution than a Les Paul. They don't want to go super ergonomic and get like a headless guitar or a Kiesel or something, but they want something which feels traditional yet is much more ergonomic, which feels like a vintage guitar, gets you all the Les Paul tones, yet it just weighs like as much as nothing. And yeah, it's just for the more, what should I say, for the person who isn't completely just stuck on, if I want a Gibson Les Paul, I just want a Gibson Les Paul, everything else is bad, PRSs don't have character. If you're that person, there's no convincing you, sorry. But there are plenty of people who love Gibson Les Pauls like me who are not like that. And it's really for that kind of a person. And yeah, I am selling this guitar though, and the reason I'm selling this is because it's not a single cut, it's not a trem. Just got no fault of the guitar. Yeah, and as I have just accumulated so many guitars, it has just become inevitable that I have to make severe choices And at this point in time, I'm not living in my room or my house. My guitars are. It is just extraordinary what's behind me right now. So because of that, this guitar is indeed on sale. I'm basically just removing everything that's not a signature. Sorry, that's not a single cut, that's not a trem. And I do have a couple of custom 24s, which are custom 24 pienzos, which is a whole different thing, very different thing. It's not trying to be a Gibson Les Paul. So yeah, if you're interested, look up this guitar. There's a condition report at the end of this video. Or for the rest of you who were just here for the review and just for fun, try and get one of these if you can, actually. Probably somewhere closer to you if that's easier. It will not disappoint, I can assure you. Alright, hope this was fun. Till next time. Alright folks, for those of you interested in buying this guitar, this is the condition report. This guitar is in very good condition. Functionally, I would give it pretty much a 10 out of 10. And cosmetically, also it's pretty close. I'm just going to try and look for anything, or rather I'm going to give you an overview of the entire guitar and try and see if I can find any micro scratches on the nitro. It's a bit tough. Is it something here? Not really. I'm just trying to look again. Yeah, so you can see it's in pretty great condition. There is no clouding, zero clouding. There are some guitars that I have that do have clouding, so those are declared accordingly. Fretboard is also in great condition. Beautiful grain on this one. That's the veneer. Ted McCarty. Not much oxidation on the pickups. The aluminium tailpiece is in great condition as well. And just looking at the back, no chips, nothing. It's just a bit of dust, I think. This needs to be wiped off, but again, zero issues whatsoever. Neck, nice and straight. Back also is flawless. I think this is pretty much as good an example as you will get of this guitar. Just gonna check the electronics for you. There is a slightly scratchy tone pot. I realize that's pretty much the only thing, but let me just play everything for you. So this is the switch. Perfectly functional. Neck, middle, bridge, coil split on bridge, coil split on middle, coil split on neck. This guitar has a volume difference, as I mentioned in the review. Doing swells on the volume pot. All good. Let me do it on with the tone pot. Let me show you the scratchiness I want to mention to you. There you go. That's the only thing on the guitar, slightly scratchy. So there you go. That's the condition report. I think that one is just a question of probably putting in a little bit of that. I'm forgetting what that liquid is called. That's about it. Otherwise, perfectly functional. As good as it gets.